Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, good evening if you're watching this back or watching it somewhere else in the world. Welcome to this workshop. A couple of things to apologize for. First, I have no office at the moment, so you're all on my lap on a laptop. Secondly, I also have an eye infection, so if I look a little bit scary this afternoon, that is why. But welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really, really looking forward to this because I haven't done a workshop with you guys in forever. And firstly, I apologize for that because it has just been such a crazy year that has been so different to everything else I've ever done. And part of what I've been doing this year is taking this workshop that I'm about to do with you into loads of workplaces and testing the actual framework. Like, does this work? Is this worth coming to my community at the Anti-Burnout Club and saying, guys, this is it. This is what I've discovered, and this is really working for people. So this has now been presented to hundreds, if not maybe thousands of employees around the country. And the feedback has been phenomenal, right? We're seeing some real change. So whether you joined the Anti-Burnout Club all the way back in 2021 and you've kind of learned along with me, or whether you're brand new here, this workshop is going to be everything I've kind of second learned, right? So the first stuff that I learned when I first burnt out and first started studying burnout was all the stuff that we did from sort of like 2021 to 2023. Then I had my daughter Evelyn. I took a year out. I studied harder. I burnt out a second time. And this is a culmination of all of that. So that's kind of like the little housekeeping bits out the way. If you're watching live or if you're watching back, please do let me know in the comments where you are, where you're watching from. And I'm just going to get started. But what I really want to stress about this workshop is we're going to kind of do a whistle-stop tour of BURN the Burnout. And then over on the app, I'm going to put a poll up at the end of this. And I'm going to ask you which part of the framework you want to learn more about. And we'll kind of go along with that way. And I'll do more resources on each part of the framework. Okay, good. And if you don't have the app, let me know and I will put a link below. Right, let's bring this to stage. The hidden signs of burnout and how to burn them out for good. So we're going to kick off. I'm not going to talk. Oh, I'm wearing the same jumper. I do have other clothes are available. I'm not going to talk too much about me because most of you hopefully watching kind of have an idea of who I am, and it's boring. Like, we want to get to the good stuff. But this is just very, very quickly a whistle-stop tour of who I am. Anti-Burnout Bex. I've burnt out twice. And like I said, this workshop is kind of like the culmination of everything I've learned the second time, right? I've got people saying that you want a link. I will make sure I sort that for you at the end. If not, I have just sent an email out to everyone, so maybe check your spam folder because I emailed everyone that was on the old platform and let them know the new link. So, Katie, if you're watching, let me know if you see that email. Okay. Before we get into the framework, there's something really important that I want to cover. And the reason that I want to cover the very basics of what burnout is I feel like at the moment, it's such an overused word that we're kind of losing the meaning of it, right? So I've seen loads of people recently being like, oh, I've had such a hard week. I'm so burnt out. Or that was such a stressful time at work. I'm fully burnt out. And then I need like a week off to recover and then I feel better, right? Burnout is exhaustion, right? This is a physical, emotional, mental load of exhaustion that is caused by prolonged stress. So a tough week is not necessarily going to burn you out. This isn't just about, being tired because life's been a bit stressful. This is about feeling depleted and unable to recharge. And I know that most of you watching this know that. I know most of you watching this have been there or you've been on the verge. But I just think it's really important that we kind of understand that burnout is not just a case of, oh, you just need a weekend off, or what I used to think was, you just need to get more well-being into your days. I just need more yoga and meditation. And that was all the kind of stuff that I taught. But then when it came to my second bout of burnout, Anti-Burnout Bex realized that no amount of yoga or meditation was ever going to get me out of this cycle, right? And that's why I'm now teaching this BURN the Burnout Framework. So just a really quick way of looking at the difference. I think this is a really cool way of thinking about the difference between stress and burnout. So stress is very much a high energy, everything feels very urgent, very up here energy wise, right? When you're stressed, you're like, oh, I've got a deadline, I need to get this done, I need to get that done. And there is nothing wrong with having stress in our lives, right? We need a bit of stress in our lives, because if we didn't have any kind of challenge stress, if we didn't have any stress at all, we'd never strive for anything. We'd never have any ambition. We'd never have any motivation. So good stress can be very motivating. And it's kind of like what gets us through the day. It gets us to deadlines. It's high energy, and it comes and goes in waves. And then you can have a little break or whatever. You can recharge and move on. Burnout, on the other end of the scale, is a complete depletion of energy. So you feel hopeless. And as someone said here in the comments, my line manager said, I just needed an early night. There is no amount of early nights that are going to get you through the burnout cycle, right? There is no amount of, oh, I just need a weekend off or whatever, because it becomes impossible to recharge. And anyone that has experienced burnout will know that the energy is just gone. You're completely drained. You're emotionally numb. You're detached. You stop caring, basically. And it's not a case of, oh, well, if I just fit in some yoga, if I just do some meditation, or if I just get an early night, that person doesn't have kids. Yeah. Early nights and early mornings. If I just get an early night, then I'll stop being burnt out. That's not how it works. And so when we're stressed, yeah, sure, getting an early night, trying to calm down our nervous system, doing all of those things, yoga, meditation, they are great for stress management, perfect. If we get stuck in burnout, stress management is not going to cut it. Hopefully that kind of makes the distinction and what the difference is. Stress, high energy, we need some stress to get through the days, to feel motivated. It comes and goes in waves. Burnout, very low energy, and no amount of rest is going to get you out of it. Someone's also said, my GP also said it was depression. So this is really interesting. There are a lot of, and you've probably noticed from the burnout column, there's a lot of crossover between burnout and depression. A lot of the symptoms are very similar. Things like, feeling like the emotional numbness, the detachment. I think the difference when it comes to burnout is kind of the cause of it. And we'll get into this as we go through the framework, and as we go through some of the different parts of that, you'll see that actually there's a way of truly understanding how you can get kind of watch out for that effectively. So let's talk about the BURN framework. As I said, if you were part of the anti-burnout club right at the beginning, then there's a good chance that my advice to you would have been things like do some yoga, meditate. We had the 5 foundations of wellness, get more sleep, eat better, hydrate, all of those things that we all know are good for our well-being, right? And that's not to say that they are not good for our well-being, and I'm completely poo-pooing everything I ever taught, because I still believe that they are great ways to calm our nervous system, to feel less stressed, to build in recovery in our days, which is really, really important. However, if you find that you go through this cycle of, hitting burnout or just about hitting burnout, you cram in all this well-being and all of a sudden you feel better and you go back to work, you go back to responsibilities, and then you fall back into that cycle, that is exactly what the BURN framework has been designed to do. Because there are many of us that are very susceptible to burnout for lots of different reasons. And I realized when I had my daughter, I am the kind of person that will continue to fall into burnout unless I deal with some very important things in my life. And that's exactly what this framework is. So this framework has been built both through my lived experience and because of lots of research that I did when I burnt out the second time, thinking, oh my goodness, everything I know, everything I've taught is wrong. So the second bout of burnout meant that I did a lot more research, and I wanted something that was really practical, because I know that I'm the kind of person that reads a lot of self-help books, that does a lot of workshops, that comes to a lot of these types of things. And I know all the knowledge, like I get it all, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I put it into practice. And I wanted this framework to be something that you can actually do and put into practice, not just another thing to learn and go, okay, yeah, I'm definitely burnt out and this is what I need to do to change it. But then that's it. Okay. So the 4 parts of the framework are: be aware, unlearn, rebuild, and now take action. And some people have asked whether I shoehorned the now in, but actually it's a really important part of it. So we're going to go through each of them in turn. But like I said, and it might be that you want to do this in the comments, I'll also put a poll up on the app. I'm also going to send an email out with this workshop replay on, and with a poll on it as well. I want to know which of these parts you want to dig into the most, so I can make sure that I build the resources around that, because I want this to be super practical. So the first one is be aware. Now, I don't just mean understanding what burnout looks like. I'm talking about being so self-aware that you can hear the tiniest little whisper of burnout before it's too late, before you hit complete exhaustion. You're so self-aware that you're like, something feels off. I need to do X, Y, and Z, right? And a big part of this is also understanding what our stresses are, because what stresses me out might not stress you out. And what stresses you out might not stress her out. It might not stress him out. And that's why I think stress is such a difficult thing to deal with, because, you know, like some people have said here, you might say to your line manager, you might say to your friend, your husband, whatever, this is really stressing me out. And they don't get it because it doesn't stress them out. So it's really, really important that we become so self-aware of the signs, of the stresses. And actually, I believe, yes, I've got some of the most common stresses here. Have a look. See if you recognize any of these. You can share them in the comments if you want. You don't have to. There's no pressure. But I've split these into 3 categories, and there's an important reason for the third one. So we've got our work-related stresses, and a lot of these are what feeds into burnout, because majority of us spend most of our lives at work, and these feel like they're out of control, right? We don't necessarily dictate our workload, or unrealistic deadlines, or lack of control over tasks, job insecurity. All of these work-related things generally are fed to us from management or whatever else, right? Then we have our personal responsibilities and stresses, which are generally given to us by our family, our loved ones. Perhaps there are other things out of our control, like our health issues. I have several chronic conditions, including arthritis. It stresses me out massively when I can't do all of the physical things that I want to do. So a lot of personal ones you might find are out of your control as well. And then we have these internal stresses, right? And I feel like these are the things that most of us are kind of missing. Like, we know what stresses us out at work. We know what stresses us out in our personal lives. But when it comes to our internal stresses, we don't necessarily notice them as much, even though they are probably the most things within our control. So things like perfectionism, things like people pleasing, imposter syndrome, fear of failure, struggling to say no and set boundaries. Now, most of these things have been given to us from childhood, right? These are not easy fixes. I pretty much tick every single one of these at some point in my life. Perfectionism, absolutely. People pleasing, yes. Imposter syndrome. There are so many internal stresses that feed into those work-related and those personal stresses. So perfectionism might drive work stress, because you're like, everything has to be perfect. I'm not going to deliver anything until it's perfect. And now my workload is super, super heavy because I feel like I'm running behind on everything. Or people pleasing, or not being able to say no. You know, I feel like I can't say no to that family member that keeps asking me for time and money and support, and it's really stressing me out. But, I want to be a good person and I can't set boundaries with them. So I'm going to keep saying yes and I'm going to keep taking on their stress, right? So you can see how these internal stresses are really linked to the other two groups, the work-related and the personal. Here we go. Katie said, I'm so bad for societal comparison, always feeling like I'm behind everyone else my age. Absolutely. Another internal stressor that then probably feeds into both personal and work, because you feel like you're having to catch up, you're having to spin your wheels to try and get to wherever anyone else is. And that feeds into those stressors. So being aware, be aware, is not just about, I'm feeling a little bit stressed. It's about, well, what's causing that stress? It's a heavy workload. Okay, well, why am I stressed? What's within my control of that heavy workload? My ability to say no to more work. So that's be aware. If that feels like the part of the framework that you want to dig into more, let me know in the comments, but you can always let me know at the end as we've gone through them all as well. Number 2, unlearn. There is a huge problem in society that tells us burnout is our fault, right? It's a personal failure. You can't hack it. Everyone else can keep up. What is wrong with you? Here's a really good one. I was actually doing a workshop for a group of charity CEOs. And one of the guys put his hands up and said, my dad and my granddad worked in the coal mines and they weren't burnt out. Don't you think it's a millennial problem or a Gen Z or whatever? And I was like, what? It's this whole cultural messaging of we just don't know hard work or whatever. Life is very different nowadays. When his dad and granddad were in the coal mine, they weren't going home and getting 500 emails about tomorrow's priorities. They weren't going home and having to deal with the societal pressure and the messaging of social media and adverts and all of that kind of stuff, right? We live in a very different society. And here's the funny thing. People were burning out then. My dad and his dad both passed away from stress-related heart disease because they constantly felt this pressure to keep up, to keep working, to never let their family down, never crumble. It was just a very different set of societal pressures that people had to unlearn. So step 2 is all about recognizing that burnout isn't a personal failure. And I'm going to show you some of these rules that we need to unlearn as part of phase 2 of the framework. Beliefs we need to unlearn, sorry. So have a look through these and tell me how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 6 there. How many of those you probably believe, even though you might not want to, but how many of those 6 do you think you probably do believe? So rest is for the weak and lazy. It's not productive to rest. My worth comes from how much I can get done, tick off the to-do list. Being really busy and exhausted all the time means I'm successful. Oh my goodness, that was mine all the time. Other people's needs have to come before my own or I'll be seen as selfish. Yeah, most of them. Asking for help makes me weak. I have to be able to carry it all on my own. If I slow down, I'll fall behind and then I'll never be successful. Sumi says most of them. Katie says 4. I probably am still stuck on a couple of these, if I'm very, very honest. And these are, as we were talking about these internal stresses, these are a lot of beliefs that we've had since childhood. We've had since school. If you don't work super hard, you're going to fail. You're going to, like I was told in a maths class once that I was going to end up working in Woolworths my whole life. Now, funny enough, my dad worked at Woolworths at that time. And I was like, okay, is that supposed to be a bad thing? Like, So at school, we get taught a lot of this stuff by our parents. And then as we get older, from those bosses, we all know those bosses, and societal messaging. Instagram is really, really bad for, if you don't get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and drink green smoothies and go to the gym for 2 hours, then you're never going to be a success. So all of these beliefs that have been ingrained in us, part 2 of the BURN framework is trying to unlearn these. And this is my favorite one because it is so deep and it's so exciting that we get to kind of unbecome who we were. But it's a hard one because we've spent so much of our lives believing this. So even me, who has now spent a very long time trying to unlearn these, could probably still tick 2 of these boxes, and I'm still working on unwinding these. So this one is more of an ongoing process, right? So we need to be aware, understand who we are, what stresses us out, what triggers us, what that looks like. And then we need to start unlearning the things that drive that. And from there, we get to rebuild. We get to rewrite the rules. Now, I used to play this little game in my 20s where I was like, if I went back to school now with everything I knew, all of my knowledge and stuff, what would I do differently? Or if I got to start that job again with all of my knowledge and everything I knew now, what would I do differently? So rebuild is like playing that game. It's like saying, if I wiped the slate of all those old beliefs, all those things that get me stuck in this constant burnout trap, what would those rules look like? What would rebuilding look like for me? And this really is about understanding what our values are, because we spent our whole lives kind of holding on to society's values of what hard work looks like and all of that kind of stuff. But if we got to rebuild and we got to rewrite the rules, what would our life look like? What would our values be? What would our days look like? And I've kind of done a little bit of an old rule, new rule here, but I've got some really fun exercises that I generally do in workplaces where we get to kind of rebuild and rewrite the story. So it could be as simple as deciding what that old rule, that old belief is, and then what your new rule is. It could be doing an exercise where you kind of write out a day in your life with your new rules. Or like I said, if I started my job again, or if I started parenting again, or if I started school again, what would I do differently? So rewriting is all about creating the new version of your life. And what do you want in your life? What do you hold dear? What values do you hold dear? And what does that then look like? So that is R. And now we've got time. Yes, I kind of raced through those a little bit because I want us to do a little exercise right here, right now. So you could do this on your phone, your computer, your pen and paper if you've got one. But like I said at the very beginning, one of the worst things about all of these workshops, all of these self-help books, all of these things that we do is that we kind of take in all the knowledge and then we go, okay, I will do that at some point. Right? I'm going to make that change at some point, maybe Monday, maybe 1st of January, maybe whatever. You guys have come here today thinking that maybe we're going to be doing something for half hour, 45 minutes. We have been chatting for 23 minutes so far. So that means we're going to have at least 5-10 minutes to take action on something right now. So we're not going to wait for the to-do list to get smaller. We're not going to wait for the 1st of January. The whole point of this framework is that it is tangible, it is actionable, we could do something about it right now. So I'm going to give you a couple of options. Hopefully you can see that because I cannot and I do not have my glasses on. I'm going to give you a couple of options that you can pick from. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do it, and you can pop it in the comments. You can just write it down on paper. It doesn't matter. But I really want you to focus the next 5 minutes on doing something with me right now. So be aware. You can pick whichever one you want, basically. Be aware is to write down 1 to 3 stresses that are within your control right now. And potentially think about what you could do about them if you want to, or you could just write down the stresses that are within your control. You could focus on unlearn, which is to jot down 3 to 4 old beliefs that you need to let go of, and think about how you could challenge them, how you can reframe them today. Rebuild is to write down 5 to 10 activities that bring you joy and that you want to have more of in your life. And then now take action. We're going to ignore that because we're doing that in the B, U, and R. B, U, and R. So you can pick be aware, unlearn, or rebuild. You're going to have a couple of minutes, and some of you might even get through a couple of these. So it might be that you say, I'm going to try and do be aware and unlearn today, or I'm going to try and do rebuild and unlearn, whatever. So I'm going to keep an eye on the timer. We're going to work on these for a couple of minutes. Hopefully you've got a pen and paper. And then at the end of that, we're going to do one more tiny little challenge. So don't go away. Write down your answers to be aware, unlearn, and or rebuild. And then we're going to do one more little mini challenge before we part ways. I definitely should have put my glasses on. And if you want to let me know in the comments which one you're focusing on, or if you want to share anything in the comments, even if you're watching it on replay, please do. But if not, it's completely fine to keep this to yourself as well. Some of you may have an urge to go and check your emails, to say, oh, I'm going to come back to this later. Nope, we're doing it right now. Funny enough, when I do this in workplaces, I notice a lot of people pick up their phones because they're all looking at their emails. So I'm like, guys, we're doing something. But it's just that, like, that focus, isn't it, for 5 minutes? Okay, I'm going to give you guys one more minute. $30 seconds. Okay. Let me know if you want to in the comments which one or two or maybe all three that you did. How to identify stressors which feel within my control. That's an interesting one. Yeah. And that takes some work actually, because it's very natural for us to identify stresses that are outside of our control, or to think, oh, that is outside of my control, when actually there are some things that we can do to bring part of it within our control. So maybe that's one thing that we need to focus on more in the resources as we kind of like grow on this framework, because I want this to be, this is just the beginning of us doing this work. So the resources that I build around this will dig into more of these in total. So it's interesting to know what challenges you face or what you want to focus more on, so I know how to expand this basically. Nice, Mandy. Yeah. Nice. So one last thing, we're going to now take action. And what I would like you to do is I would like you to grab your calendar, grab your diary. If it's on your phone, that's also great. I want you to find a couple of times going forward over the next, let's say, few weeks, couple of weeks, 2 weeks, because we're getting closer to Christmas and I want this to kind of stay focused before Christmas. I want you to find 2 or 3 times in the next 2 weeks where you can come back and do the ones that you missed. So if you did be aware, then you've got unlearn and rebuild to do. And look, it took us 5 minutes, right? It took us a few minutes to do this work, but this is really, really important stuff to help us burn the burnout out for good and break this cycle. So 2 slots in your calendar for over the next 2 weeks of just 5 minutes. It could be over this week, right? Just as long as the maximum is over the next 2 weeks. of 5 minutes each where you can focus on the other 2 that you didn't get to. And I'm going to send an email out with all of this in it. What I would like you to do is I'm going to link to a poll on the app. I'd really, really like you to come and tell me which of these you want to focus on first. And if you've got any questions or anything around it, like things like identifying stresses within your control, so that I can build these resources to make sure this Burn the Burnout framework becomes the best thing you've ever done for your burnout, right? Or for potential burnout. So that's your challenge. I'm going to leave it there. If you want to, you can do the other 2. You can do unlearn and rebuild now. And then you can put some time in your calendar to dig into these even more. But what's really important is that we've got 1 ticked off the list and we get in our calendar the rest of the times that we're going to focus on this, and that you please come and find the poll in the app or check your emails. Once in the next sort of 15 minutes, I will add a description if you're watching this on YouTube with a link to the app, just in case you're not seeing the emails or anything like that. So check back in 15 minutes if you're watching this live, and all of the details will be there. And that is it. I'm going to leave you with this for now. Take a screenshot of this if you want. Again, I'll be sending it all over very, very shortly. Thank you so much for joining me. I really, really hope you're excited to start this work with me, and that it's given you a good idea of what we're going to be doing and how it's not just a case of I need to fit more yoga or meditation into my day. This is real work that will stop us falling into that trap. It will stop society telling us that it's all our fault, and we can actually take some real action towards this. So thank you so much for joining me, everybody. And I'm looking forward to doing more work with you. Take care. Bye-bye.